Good morning and welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast for another morning minute meditation. Thank you for joining me. My thought this morning might be somewhat of an odd thought, but I've been meditating recently on the disadvantage of advantages. And this comes from the book of Romans chapter 3. If you spend some time reading chapter 2, you find that Paul directly addresses the Jews, and he pretty much spends the whole chapter tearing away the religious crutch of the law and of circumcision and all of the traditions that they had come to rest in, and tried to help them realize that just because they had the law, just because they had circumcision and the covenants that God had given them, that it didn't make them any more favorable spiritually to the Lord than the Gentiles. But after doing that, in chapter number 3, he begins to address kind of these hypothetical questions that they would have after reading chapter number 2. And he begins in verse number 1 by saying this. Let me read it to you. He said, "What advantage then hath the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision?" So this might be a question that a Jew would have after reading everything Paul said in the previous chapter. And here's how he responds to it in verse number 2. He said, "Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God." So he talks about the fact that the law and that the covenants, they were definitely an advantage to the nation of Israel. Even though they didn't save them and it didn't make them any more loved by the Lord than the rest of the world, it did give them an advantage. But you know as well as I do that all of those advantages that had been given to the nation of Israel ultimately ended up becoming their disadvantages. They had gotten so familiar with the things of God. They had been blessed so much and all of the teachings of the law. And he references, in fact, in that verse specifically, the oracles, the word of God. And they were so familiar with it that it didn't really mean much to them. I thought about, are we not so many times just like the nation of Israel? Probably most of us that are watching this little video, we've been around the truth, we've been around church. Most of us have been born and raised in America, and we've been given so many advantages, but yet a lot of the times our advantages become our disadvantages. It seems like this happens so often with young people who are raised in church and they know the truth and they don't even realize how blessed that they've been to experience that in their life. And a lot of times they allow the truth that they know to become their disadvantage. It becomes too familiar. I want to challenge you with this. Don't let the advantages, the blessings God has given us, become our disadvantage. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great day. We'll see you next time on the Higher Grounds podcast.